Inside a downtown Los Angeles warehouse in 2017, a man named TK Devine pulled the toilet out of a portable bathroom and started building a home inside it. A fold-up twin bed, a mini fridge, a kitchenette on one wall, and a shower unit around the back. He called it a porta home. What nobody outside that warehouse understood was that Devine had just proved something billion-dollar government programs had been failing to figure out for decades. You can build a functional home for someone sleeping on the street from materials headed straight for the landfill. If you had asked anyone walking past that warehouse what was happening inside, they would have told you some guy was messing around with old Port-A-Potties. They had no idea they were looking at what might be one of the cheapest housing solutions anyone had come up with in years. At the time, according to the federal government's own numbers, hundreds of thousands of Americans had nowhere to sleep on any given night. By the January 2025 count, that number had reached exactly 745,000 people, either in shelters, in temporary housing, or sleeping outside with nothing over their heads at all. Nearly 150,000 of them were children. California alone accounted for more than 161,000. Over 1 million public school students across the country lacked stable housing, meaning children going to class every day from shelters, from cars, and from the couches of relatives who barely had room themselves. And while politicians debated billion-dollar budgets and decade-long timelines, something different was happening at the ground level. Ordinary Americans with no government budget and no fancy title were picking up hammers, buying plywood, ripping toilets out of portable bathrooms, and building homes with their own hands. TK Devine was 35 years old and working a handful of odd jobs around Los Angeles. He was also an author with a deep interest in sustainable housing and microarchitecture, but his interest was not academic. He had been intentionally living out of his truck and a former office space for years, choosing to skip rent entirely so he could study what it actually felt like to live with almost nothing. Not as a stunt, not for content. He genuinely wanted to understand what a person needs to survive and what they need to feel human. And while he was doing that, he watched the homeless population around him explode. The number of people living on the streets of Los Angeles had climbed by 75% over the previous 8 years. Tens of thousands of people were sleeping on sidewalks, under overpasses, and in tent cities that stretched for blocks along palm-lined boulevards. In Silicon Valley, home to Apple and Google, the number of people living full-time in cars, vans, and RVs had more than doubled since the pandemic. Devine looked at all of that. Then he looked at the dumpsters behind construction sites full of decommissioned portable toilets, big, sturdy, weatherproof plastic shells that rental companies were replacing and throwing away. Units that could be picked up at government surplus auctions or on sites like GovPlanet and GovDeals for as little as $100, sometimes even less. The idea was almost absurdly simple. A used portable toilet is a watertight, UV-resistant, structurally sound plastic shell designed to survive years of outdoor exposure. It already has ventilation. It already has a door with a latch. It is lightweight enough to sit on a small trailer. And when rental companies upgrade their fleets, they sell the old units for practically nothing. Older units with cosmetic damage, the ones nobody else wants, go for $100 or even less at auction. He started with a wheelchair-accessible portable toilet because those units are the largest. About 8 feet by 8 feet of interior floor space. He stripped everything out, sealed the walls, and started building inward. The bed folds up against the wall during the day, turning the room into a small kitchen and living space. A mini fridge tucks under the sleeping platform. When you need the bathroom, you walk around to the attached shower unit on the back. Recycled water from the shower irrigates a small rooftop garden that sits next to solar panels, wired to power the lights, and a small charging station inside. The whole thing rests on a trailer, so it can be parked on any residential property, and the only hookup it needs is a garden hose for water. Devine told CBS Los Angeles that he could fit his 6-foot 1-inch frame comfortably on the bed, with his shoes off like his mama taught him, and that it was as big as a standard twin mattress. The whole design revolved around one principle. A person who has been sleeping on concrete needs 3 things before anything else: a dry place to lie down, a door they can close, and the feeling that the space is theirs. Everything else, the solar panels, the garden, the shower, those are upgrades. But even the basic shell gives someone something a tent on the sidewalk never can. His vision was not just one unit. He wanted to create entire communities he called our own backyard homes, where porta-home villages would occupy vacant lots, unused backyards, and transitional plots across the city. Places where people could have a secure roof and a place to park it. He imagined homeowners offering unused side yards, churches donating parking lots, and entire neighborhoods opening up space for people who had been sleeping on their streets for years. The full prototype cost around $15,000 when outfitted with insulation, wiring, solar panels, and plumbing. But Devine saw a clear path to scale that number down dramatically for basic emergency shelter versions, and he was not the only person thinking this way. About 2,500 miles northeast of that Los Angeles warehouse, a carpenter from the Boston area named Derek Diedrichson had been building something even more radical: micro-shelters assembled almost entirely from garbage, shipping pallets pulled off the curb, discarded storm windows from neighbors doing renovations, old kitchen cabinets left out for trash pickup, pickle jars repurposed as windows, water cooler jugs turned into skylights. His structures cost, on average, less than $200 to build. The largest one, which he called the Gypsy Junker, measured about 24 square feet inside and was made primarily from pallets, cast-off windows, and a neighbor's discarded kitchen cabinets. Another design, the Hickshaw, was a sleeper built on a rolling cedar lounge chair, 2.5 feet wide by 6.5 feet deep, a rickshaw for Hicks, as he put it. Even his smallest creation, the Boxy Lady, 2 cubes mounted on a long pallet, could shelter a person from wind and rain for practically nothing. Diedrichson said his original idea was to see if he could build a homeless shelter for under $100, or a tree fort, or a traveling sales kiosk. That was part of his charm. The guy was a drummer in a Rage Against the Machine tribute band called Age Against the Machine, a comic book writer, a home inspector, and a DJ. He was not exactly who you picture when you think of someone solving the housing crisis. His designs blurred the line between emergency shelter, festival sleeper, and backyard fort. A reviewer once called him a mad scientist with too much lumber on his hands. Another said his work was like This Old House meets Wayne's World. But behind the quirky branding was a dead serious insight. If you can build a weatherproof, lockable shelter for $200 out of materials that were literally headed for the landfill, then cost is no longer a valid excuse for leaving people out in the cold. Every city in America generates enough discarded building materials in a single week to shelter dozens of people. The pallets are free, the windows are free, the kitchen cabinets are sitting on the curb, waiting for the garbage truck. The only missing ingredient is someone willing to pick up a hammer. Diedrichson's work was featured in the New York Times, NPR, the Wall Street Journal, and on HGTV. He wrote books called Micro Shelters and Micro Living, and he has hosted building workshops in Vermont for over 15 years, where complete beginners, people who have never held a circular saw, learn to frame and finish microstructures with their own hands in a single weekend. He proved that the skills required to build a shelter are not specialized. Anyone can learn them, and the materials are already sitting in every neighborhood in America, waiting to be used. Now, these individual stories were not isolated experiments. Devine with his Port-A-Potties in Los Angeles and Diedrichson with his pallet shelters in Massachusetts were part of a much larger wave building across the country. But this next detail explains everything about why the wave keeps running into walls. In South Los Angeles, around 2015, a struggling musician named Elvis Summers noticed a 60-year-old grandmother named Irene McGee sleeping in the dirt next to an apartment building. Everyone in the neighborhood called her Smokey. She had been homeless for over 10 years. People knew her name. They waved and said hello, and every single night, they went inside their warm homes while she stayed outside. One day, Summers went to a hardware store, spent less than $500 on lumber, and built an 8-foot-long wooden house on wheels right on the sidewalk. A door with a lock, a window, and just enough room to sleep safely off the ground. He filmed the build and posted it to YouTube. That video got 5.7 million views. His GoFundMe raised over $100,000. Over the following months, he built and gave away 37 tiny houses across Los Angeles, refining the design along the way with solar panels, steel-reinforced doors, and smoke detectors. Each house cost about $1,200 and gave people something a tent never could: a front door they could lock, a space that belonged to them. One man he built a home for, a guy named Kevin, told him something that stuck. He said, that key you gave me to open that door, it reminded me what I was worth. This is where the story takes a turn nobody expected. Instead of celebrating what Summers had done, the city of Los Angeles sent sanitation workers to confiscate 3 of his tiny homes right off the sidewalk. They tagged others for removal. A spokesperson for the mayor's office called the structures a safety hazard and said people would be better off in official shelters. This was the same city that had spent years trying to pass a nearly $2 billion plan to end homelessness, a plan that had largely stalled. The same city where tens of thousands of people slept outside every single night. And their response to a man spending his own money to give those people a locked door and a dry roof was to send a truck to haul it all away. The public backlash was immediate. Protests followed. The city key eventually returned the seized structures, and Summers kept building. Through his organization, the Tiny House Project, he has since built hundreds of shelters ranging from basic $500 emergency units to larger tiny houses costing between $7,000 and $15,000 with a kitchen, bedroom, bathroom, and working electricity. But what happened to Summers was not an isolated incident. The same pattern has played out in city after city across the country. Zoning laws in dozens of American cities still make it nearly impossible to place tiny homes legally. Building codes written decades ago never imagined a 240 square foot house on wheels as a legitimate residence. In some cities, a volunteer can build a tiny home in a single weekend, but the permit process to place it legally takes 18 months. Even in Greenfield, Massachusetts, local committees are still debating new ordinances that would allow tiny homes on wheels in campground-style communities for the first time. That tension sits at the center of this entire movement. On one side, you have everyday Americans spending their own time and money to put roofs over their neighbors' heads. On the other, you have bureaucracies that move slowly, spend enormously, and produce results that are often worse than what a volunteer with a truck full of plywood can accomplish on a Saturday afternoon. Consider the cost comparison for a second. A single tiny home built by Sound Foundations Northwest, a nearly all-volunteer crew in Seattle, costs $4,500 in materials, and they finish 3 to 4 per week. A tiny house village can be built from scratch in less than 6 months for between $100,000 and $500,000. A traditional emergency shelter takes years to permit and construct and costs millions of dollars. Organizations like Operation Tiny Home have built their entire model around this gap, creating affordable micro-housing specifically for veterans and people at risk of homelessness through what they call a pay-it-forward housing program. Cities that should be thanking these volunteers for solving problems they have failed to solve for years are instead sending sanitation crews to haul their work to the dump. Now, if you care about this issue, and specifically about the people still out there tonight sleeping on concrete with nothing between them and the cold ground, there is something practical you can do right now. The TerraShell bivy uses a reflective thermal lining that sends your body heat back toward you and creates a windproof, water-resistant shell around your entire body. It fits in a pocket, costs under $20 per bag when bought in bundles, and works without batteries, fuel, or any setup at all. You just climb in. People keep them in their car or buy a bundle and hand them out directly to people sleeping outside in their community. The link is in the description below. By 2026, even people who had been homeless themselves were joining the building movement. A man in Los Angeles named Marino, who works cleaning warehouses during the day, started building and selling small homes on wheels to other unhoused people for just $150 each. A woman walked past while he was building one and left a $100 deposit on the spot. He has built and sold 6 so far because he understands something that billion-dollar programs keep missing. People sleeping outside tonight do not want to wait 3 years for a committee to approve a blueprint. They need a roof now, and the numbers from cities that embrace tiny home villages prove him right. In Seattle, the Low Income Housing Institute built 18 tiny house villages across the Puget Sound region. Hundreds of students, volunteers, churches, and businesses donated over 325 tiny houses. At one event at the CenturyLink Event Center, over 400 corporate volunteers built 30 tiny houses in a single day. A Girl Scout troop built one of the homes and furnished it with a bed, a comforter, a dresser, and artwork on the walls, with boxes of Girl Scout cookies tucked inside the drawer for whoever moved in. Since 2022, over 6,000 people in the King County and Pierce County areas have transitioned off the streets through those village programs. Over 98% of those who moved into permanent housing were still housed 1 year later. Compare that to the Inside Safe program in Los Angeles. The city spent $300 million. According to their own data, roughly 40% of the people placed into housing ended up right back on the streets. $300 million, and nearly half wound up homeless again. That contrast tells you everything. The movement has now reached cities far beyond the coasts. In Nashville, Pastor Jeff Obafemi Carr raised nearly $67,000 to build tiny homes in the backyard of the Green Street Church on the east side of the city. The homes are painted in bright yellows, blues, oranges, and purples with red doors and white trim. Each one measures about 5 by 12 feet inside and costs around $7,000 to build. A resident named Peter told a reporter that it is a lot better than living in a tent, and that if you have some ingenuity in you, you can figure stuff out. Not glamorous, but a locked door and a dry roof beat a wet tent on the pavement every time. In Detroit, the Cass Community Social Services launched a rent-to-own program where formerly homeless residents, people who had been incarcerated, people who had aged out of foster care, or people living as senior citizens on fixed incomes, pay modest rent year by year. Anyone who stays in the program for 7 years owns the home outright. No mortgage, no bank approval, just 7 years of showing up. In December 2025, a man named D'Angelo signed the deed to his house and became the third homeowner in the community, with more expected to follow in 2026. A man who once had nothing now holds a deed with his name on it. In Indianapolis, an organization called Sanctuary Indy broke ground in March 2026 on Circle City Village, a planned community of tiny homes and duplexes. A donor pledged to match up to $350,000 for construction. In Minnesota, Sacred Settlements builds 140 square foot homes using volunteer labor from faith communities, where residents maintain a community garden and create artwork while paying a modest rent of around $200 a month. In Santa Clarita, California, more than 100 elementary school children between the ages of 9 and 11 spent an entire school year helping construct a 28-foot tiny home, sawing planks, installing insulation, and raising plywood walls alongside adult volunteers. The state of California eventually took notice. They announced delivery of 1,200 tiny homes to Los Angeles, San Diego County, San Jose, and Sacramento, with the National Guard assisting in preparation. 500 of those homes were set aside specifically for Los Angeles, a government finally borrowing a page from the grassroots playbook, admitting that sometimes smaller is faster, and faster is what people sleeping outside tonight actually need. So how are Americans building shelters from portable toilets and scrap lumber for under $200? One board at a time with their own hands, using their own money, not waiting for a 10-year plan to reach year 3. TK Divine put it plainly: people living rough on the streets need consistency. They need a good night's rest. A porta-potty is the last place anyone would consider a home, but making something beautiful and functional out of the least likely material proves a point that needed proving. If you can make a home out of a portable toilet, you can make a home out of anything. Derek Diedrichson saw shipping pallets and discarded windows and thought, what can I build for under $100 that keeps a person dry and alive? Elvis Summers saw a grandmother sleeping face first in the dirt and decided he was done walking past her. And a formerly homeless man in Los Angeles is selling hand-built shelters for $150 because he knows what it feels like to have nothing between you and the cold ground. There are still 750,000 people out there tonight with nowhere to go. But a Girl Scout troop in Seattle put cookies in the dresser drawer of a tiny home they built with their own hands for someone they would never meet. TK Divine pulled the toilet out of a plastic box on the side of a highway and saw a bedroom inside. And maybe that has always been the answer. Not billion-dollar programs and decade-long timelines, but neighbors building for neighbors, one tiny home at a time. If this video opened your eyes, click the video on screen right now. The story I covered there connects directly to what you just watched.